On what should have been the happiest day of her life, a bride was humiliated and beaten by her husband and mother-in-law in front of all the guests. She called off the wedding on the spot, never realizing that decision had just saved her life. If this twist gripped you, smash that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe now and stay tuned, because the storm that follows will leave you breathless. It was a bright, sunny morning in Charleston, South Carolina, and Vivian felt as though she were living a dream. The mirror reflected her nervous yet radiant smile as her stylist carefully adjusted the veil over her intricately braided hair. The ceremony was just a few hours away, and every detail, from the hand-embroidered lace gown to the fresh flowers adorning the venue, seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Today will be perfect, she thought, just as her best friend Amara swept into the room, holding a champagne flute in one hand. "Girl, this is your day. Don't let anything or anyone ruin it," Amara said, trying to steady Vivian's trembling hands. But the peace of the moment shattered when Dominic's mother, Regina, entered without so much as a knock. Clad in a gown that looked more fitting for the bride's mother than the groom's, Regina surveyed Vivian from head to toe with thinly veiled disdain. "That's the dress you chose? I thought it would be something more appropriate for the occasion," she said with a saccharine smile that dripped with venom. The words stung like an invisible slap, but Vivian forced herself to remain calm. She had endured Regina's passive-aggressive jabs from the beginning of her relationship with Dominic, but never imagined she'd have to endure them on a day so special. Amara, ever quick to stand up for her friend, stepped forward with a defiant smile. "She looks stunning, doesn't she? It's a custom design. Nothing like those off-the-rack boutique dresses," Amara quipped, her tone sharp as glass. Regina's lips thinned into a disapproving line, but she said nothing more, turning on her heels and leaving a suffocating tension in her wake. Hours later, the ceremony began. Vivian was breathtaking as she walked down the aisle, her heart pounding with a mix of joy and nervous anticipation. Yet something about Dominic seemed off. He avoided her gaze during the vows, his eyes darting to his phone at every vibration. Each notification seemed to carry more weight than the woman standing before him, pledging to love him in sickness and in health. The situation worsened at the reception. Regina wasted no opportunity to make cutting remarks about Vivian's guests, describing them as rowdy or out of place. Dominic, rather than defending his new wife, chose silence, or worse, offered a nervous chuckle, as if trying to smooth over the tension. The breaking point came when Regina, wineglass in hand, approached the microphone to give a toast. What began as seemingly warm words quickly turned into a public humiliation. "Dominic, darling, you've always had such a generous heart. I hope this marriage is everything you dream of, though, of course, not all dreams end the way we'd like," she said, her gaze locking pointedly onto Vivian. A deafening silence fell over the room. Vivian felt the weight of every pair of eyes on her. Before she could fully process the moment, a murmur rose from behind. Turning, she saw Dominic engaged in a heated argument with Amara, who was confronting him about his apathy. "Dominic!" Amara shouted, her voice rising with exasperation. "For God's sake, defend her!" The room gasped collectively as Dominic, in a sudden fit of anger, struck Vivian across the face. The physical blow was light, but the emotional impact was shattering. Vivian staggered slightly but stood firm, her resolve hardening as murmurs turned into audible outrage. "This is over," she said, her voice steady and loud enough to silence the room. Without waiting for a response, she pulled the wedding ring from her finger and tossed it onto the main table. Every eye followed her as she walked out with grace and determination, leaving behind a sea of stunned faces and whispered shock. Amara caught up with her outside, pulling her into a tight embrace as tears finally streamed down Vivian's face. "That's not the end, Vi," Amara said firmly, holding her friend close. "This is just the beginning of something so much better." That night, Vivian found refuge in Amara's small but cozy apartment. Modest yet inviting, the space was filled with framed photos of shared adventures and cherished memories. Seated on the couch with a steaming cup of tea she barely touched, Vivienne replayed the events of the day in her mind. A mixture of heartbreak and liberation swirled within her, and for the first time she allowed herself to envision a future unburdened by humiliation or unworthiness. Every insult, every disdainful glare, and most painfully, Dominic's public slap replayed in Vivienne's mind like a film she couldn't pause. "V, do you want to talk about it?" Amara asked gently, draping a blanket over her. Vivienne shook her head, but the storm brewing in her eyes betrayed the emotional torrent she was fighting to contain. After a heavy silence, she finally spoke, her voice trembling. "How did I end up here, Cammy? I thought he was different. I really believed he loved me. But he let his mother humiliate me, and worse. What he did, right in front of everyone." Her voice broke mid-sentence. "He's a coward, Vi. But you aren't," Amara said, her tone both tender and resolute. "Look, tonight might feel like the worst night of your life, but it can also be the start of something better. Tomorrow, we'll go to your place, pack up everything, and leave. You're not facing this alone." Vivienne nodded, grateful for her friend's unwavering strength, even as fear and uncertainty gnawed at her. How would she face Dominic and Regina the next day? How could she rebuild her life after investing so much in that relationship? The next morning, after a sleepless night, Vivienne and Amara headed to the apartment she had shared with Dominic. Ethan, Vivienne's older brother, offered to help, ensuring they could get in and out quickly before Dominic returned from work. "Are you sure about this? We can wait if you're not ready," Ethan asked as he parked his truck outside the building. "No, Ethan," Vivienne replied, her voice steady though her hands trembled slightly. "I need to close this chapter today." Stepping into the apartment, Vivienne was immediately overwhelmed by a rush of familiarity. The framed photos of their travels still adorned the walls. His cologne lingered in the air, and in every corner, echoes of their recent fights seemed to reverberate. Amara wasted no time, grabbing boxes from Ethan's truck and starting to pack Vivienne's clothes and belongings. Meanwhile, Vivienne stood frozen in the middle of the living room, her mind a swirl of emotions. "Vi, don't look back. Just pack what you need. This place doesn't deserve your tears," Amara said firmly, breaking through Vivienne's haze. Suddenly, the front door burst open with a loud crash. Dominic had come back earlier than expected. His face bore the unmistakable signs of a hangover, and his darkened eyes burned with fury at the sight of Vivienne with her friends. "What the hell is going on here?" he bellowed, slamming the door shut. Ethan, towering and calm, immediately stepped between Dominic and Vivienne. "She's here to get her things," he said evenly, though his voice carried an unspoken warning. "Don't make this harder than it already is." Dominic ignored him, directing his venomous gaze at Vivienne. "So, this is what you do? Run away like a coward? After everything I've done for you?" His words dripped with bitterness. Vivienne met his glare, her fear giving way to a steady surge of anger. "Everything you've done for me," she shot back. "Like letting your mother insult me, like hitting me in front of everyone? No, Dominic, you destroyed this, and I won't stay to let you keep tearing me apart." Dominic took a step toward her, but Ethan's firm hand on his chest stopped him in his tracks. "Not another step, Dominic," Ethan said, his voice low and commanding. "I won't warn you again." For a tense moment, Dominic looked as if he might lash out, but the imposing presence of Ethan made him think twice. Breathing heavily, he backed away, collapsing onto the sofa. "Nobody else will ever love you like I did, Vivienne," he muttered, his voice laced with cruel disdain. "You're too much trouble." The words stung like knives, but this time Vivienne didn't let them break her. She closed the last box, turned to him, and said with quiet conviction, "I'd rather be alone than with someone who doesn't know the meaning of respect." With Ethan and Amara's help, she carried the boxes out to the truck. As the three of them drove away from the apartment, Vivienne felt a strange mix of emotions: grief for what she'd lost, but also a newfound strength she never knew she had. As Vivienne walked away, she cast one last glance at the building where she had once envisioned a bright and happy future. Now, it was nothing more than a symbol of the life she was leaving behind. At Ethan's home, Vivienne began unpacking her belongings. Each item she carefully placed in its new spot felt like a small step forward toward rebuilding her life. Amara, ever supportive, stood by her side. "Vi, I have an idea," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Do you remember that dream you had about starting a fashion design business? This is the perfect time to make it happen. You've got the talent, the creativity, and now you've got the freedom." For the first time in what felt like days, Vivienne managed a smile. Though the weight of her past still clung to her, a faint spark of hope flickered within. "Maybe you're right, Cammy," Vivienne said, her voice soft but resolute. "Maybe this really is the beginning of something better." In the days that followed, Vivienne began adjusting to her new reality. Though the shadows of her past lingered, her determination to rebuild her life grew stronger with each small step forward. Ethan, always protective, offered to let her stay as long as she needed, but Vivienne was adamant that she wouldn't rely on anyone for too long. One morning, over breakfast, Ethan broke the silence. "Vi," he began cautiously, setting his phone down. "I don't mean to pry, but have you thought about what you're going to do next? With your career? Or where you'll live?" Vivienne sighed, the question weighing heavily on her mind. "I've been thinking about it," she admitted. "Maybe it's time I pursue that dream of starting my own design business. It's something I've always wanted, but I kept putting it off because of..." Her voice trailed off and she hesitated. "Because of him," Ethan finished, his tone sharp. "Well, he's not here to hold you back anymore. Do it, Vi. I know you can." That afternoon, with Amara by her side, Vivienne started scouting for rental spaces. Despite the steep prices, she found a small storefront in downtown, a quaint space that seemed perfect for a design studio. The walls were peeling and the floors needed a complete overhaul, but Vivienne saw its potential. "Are you sure you want to dive into this now?" Amara asked, kicking a loose piece of debris on the floor. "If I wait until I feel completely ready, I'll never start," Vivienne replied firmly. "This is what I want, Cammy, and I'm going to make it work." With Ethan and a few close friends lending a hand, Vivienne began the renovations. Long nights spent painting walls and arranging furniture were filled with laughter and a sense of camaraderie that reminded her of the strength in human connection. Slowly but surely, the space transformed, becoming a reflection of her creativity and passion. One evening, as Vivienne was putting the finishing touches on the studio, Ethan handed her an envelope. "This came for you," he said, his expression tinged with concern. Vivian opened the letter, and her heart sank as she read the first few lines. It was from Regina. Though it didn't contain outright threats, the words dripped with venom. "I hope you realize what you've lost. Dominic doesn't deserve someone like you, and you'll never be enough for anyone. Maybe you should stop embarrassing yourself and come back." The sting was immediate, but something inside Vivian had shifted. Instead of breaking down or letting the words consume her, she tore the letter into tiny pieces and tossed them in the trash. "I'm not letting her or Dominic control my life anymore," she said aloud, more to herself than to Ethan. Days turned into weeks, and the studio, now named Renasa, a testament to her fresh start, opened its doors. At first, business was slow, but word of mouth soon began to spread. Vivian's talent caught the attention of a local designer who invited her to collaborate on a major project. Just when things seemed to be falling into place, her past came rushing back to haunt her. One afternoon, while sketching a new design, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and froze. The message was from Dominic. "Vivian, we need to talk. I haven't stopped thinking about you." Reading his words felt like a bucket of ice water poured over her. For a long moment, she sat motionless, her emotions a whirlwind of anger and disbelief. How could Dominic have the audacity to reach out after everything he had done? "Who is it?" Amara asked, stepping closer as she noticed the tension in Vivian's expression. Vivian held up her phone, showing the message to Amara, who burst into an incredulous laugh. "Seriously, that man has no shame. Let me respond for you." "No, Cammy, I'll handle this my way," Vivian replied firmly. After mulling it over, she chose not to respond. Instead, she blocked Dominic's number and refocused on her work, determined to keep him from disrupting her life again. Still, the incident left her unsettled. Even as she made progress in rebuilding herself, the fear that Dominic or Regina might try to sabotage her lingered in the back of her mind. That evening, as she was locking up her studio, she noticed a man she didn't recognize watching her from the corner of the street. Trying to brush it off, she turned away, but her unease spiked when he started walking in her direction. Her heart pounded as she quickened her pace toward her car. By the time she reached home, she couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. When she told Ethan what had happened, his concern was evident. "Do you think Dominic sent him?" he asked, his voice tight with worry. "I don't know. Maybe I'm just being paranoid," she admitted, "but I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right." Ethan nodded, promising to stay vigilant. Though shaken, Vivian resolved not to let fear control her. She was done letting Dominic and Regina dictate her life. In the days that followed, Vivian found herself balancing moments of success with lingering anxiety. Her studio, Renasa, was beginning to gain traction. Clients were thrilled with her designs, spreading word-of-mouth recommendations that brought in new business. For the first time in ages, Vivian felt like she was building something entirely her own. But the persistent fear that Dominic or Regina might resurface kept her on edge. One afternoon, as Vivian was working on a special order for an important client, Amara rushed into the studio, visibly upset. "Vivian, you need to see this," she said, thrusting her phone forward. It was a social media post from Regina, full of thinly veiled jabs about certain women who don't know their place, and how some relationships crumble when one person isn't enough. She hadn't named anyone, but Vivian knew the post was about her. "Does she not have anything better to do?" Vivian muttered in frustration, dropping her pencil onto the table. "She's trying to provoke you, Vi. Don't give her the satisfaction, but you should be careful. That woman is unhinged," Amara warned. Vivian knew Amara was right, but she refused to live her life in fear. However, that night, as she was closing up the studio, something unnerved her. A sealed envelope had been slipped under the door. Inside was a torn wedding photo with a handwritten note. "Don't think you can escape your place." The sight sent a jolt of terror through her. Her hands trembled as she clutched the photo, her mind racing with questions. Was this from Dominic, Regina, or someone else acting on their behalf? At home, Ethan and Amara insisted she report the incident to the police. "This isn't just mind games anymore, Vi. This is harassment. You can't let it slide," Ethan said, his voice tight with anger. Though the idea of reliving the ordeal through explanations sickened her, Vivian knew they were right. The next day, she filed a report at the local police station. Unfortunately, the officers weren't as reassuring as she'd hoped. "Without clear evidence that this individual poses an immediate threat, all we can do is file the report," the officer said, his fingers clacking on the keyboard. Walking out of the station, Vivian felt deflated, but not defeated. If anything, the lack of support only strengthened her resolve to stand firm. A few days later, life threw her an unexpected lifeline. During a local design event in Santa Fe, a well-known fashion editor stopped by her booth, drawn to her unique designs. Impressed, he proposed a collaboration for an upcoming issue of his magazine. "This could be the breakthrough you've been waiting for," Amara exclaimed when Vivian shared the news. Though exhilarated by the opportunity, Vivian knew the attention would only increase the risk of Dominic or Regina resurfacing. But this time, she wouldn't let the threat of their interference hold her back. Her intuition had been right all along. One evening, while she was absorbed in designing layouts for the magazine, a message popped up from an unknown number. As she opened it, her breath caught. There was a picture of her studio, taken from the outside, followed by the chilling words, "Be careful what you wish for." Fear crept over her again, but this time she refused to stay silent. She immediately called Ethan, who arrived at the studio within minutes. "We're installing security cameras. If they think they can scare you, they're in for a rude awakening," Ethan said firmly as he inspected the front entrance. The cameras were installed the very next day, and while Vivian felt a sliver of relief, the uneasy sensation of being constantly watched refused to leave her. Every time she walked through the streets of San Francisco, she could feel invisible eyes following her, shadows slipping away whenever she turned to look. One afternoon, while reviewing the security footage, she stumbled upon something unsettling. A man in a dark cap was loitering outside the studio. Though he didn't try to break in, his movements were suspicious enough to raise alarm. Determined, Vivian took the recording to the police, hoping they'd take action this time. "This gives us something tangible. We'll investigate, but we advise you to stay vigilant. Have you noticed anything else unusual lately?" asked the officer. "Yes," Vivian replied, her voice trembling. "I feel like someone's been following me, but I can't say who." That evening, over dinner with Ethan and her close friend Amara, she tried to piece together the puzzle. Why would anyone want to harm her? How far were they willing to go? "Vi, you might want to think about hiring private security," Ethan suggested. "At least until we figure out who's behind this." Though hesitant, Vivian knew he was right. The cost of private security was steep, but no price was too high for peace of mind. In the days that followed, a security guard began patrolling both her studio and Ethan's home. His presence offered some reassurance, though Vivian couldn't shake the feeling that the real threat was closer than she dared to imagine. Nights at Ethan's house were long, with her insomnia growing worse by the day. She often startled awake, heart racing from noises that turned out to be nothing more than the wind or a neighbor's footsteps. One evening, as she worked on sketches in her room, Ethan walked in with a grim expression. "I just talked to the guard," he began, folding his arms across his chest. "He said he saw someone lurking around the house a few hours ago, but when he went to check, there was no one there." Vivian's face tightened. The idea of someone being so close was terrifying. "Do you think it could be Dominic?" she whispered. "I don't know, Vi, but whoever it is, we'll find them," Ethan replied, gripping her hand firmly. "You're not alone." The next day at the studio, things started to feel normal again. Clients came in, orders piled up, and for a brief moment, Vivian allowed herself to focus solely on her work. But that fragile peace was shattered when a stranger walked through the door. He was dressed casually, with a baseball cap pulled low to obscure his face. His nervous demeanor set Vivian on edge as his eyes darted around the room, scanning every corner. "Can I help you?" she asked from behind the counter, her voice steady despite the tight knot forming in her stomach. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he approached the counter slowly, placing both hands on its surface. "Are you Vivian?" he asked, his voice low and laced with an almost menacing undertone. Vivian swallowed hard, but refused to let her fear show. "Yes. What can I do for you?" she replied firmly, her eyes locked on his. The man stared at her for what felt like an eternity before pulling an envelope from his pocket and placing it in front of her. "A message from someone who wants to help you," he said with a sinister smile, then turned and left the studio without another word. Vivian waited until he was out of sight before daring to open the envelope. Inside, she found a handwritten letter. "Vivian, stop what you're doing before things get worse for you. This isn't a warning. It's a promise." Her hands trembled as she held the note, the panic rising within her like a tidal wave. She quickly called Ethan and Amara. "This is too much. I can't handle this anymore," she said, showing them the letter as soon as they arrived at the studio. Amara, always the bold one, took the letter and ripped it into pieces. "Vi, you can't let them scare you. That's exactly what they want," she said firmly, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of worry. Ethan, on the other hand, decided to take action. He installed extra locks on the studio door and insisted on accompanying Vivienne whenever she went out. While these measures provided some reassurance, the unsettling feeling of being watched refused to fade. Later that evening, as they were having dinner together, Vivian's phone buzzed. She picked it up and froze. It was a photo taken from outside the house, capturing her, Ethan, and Amara sitting at the table. Accompanying the image was a chilling message. "Do you really think you're safe?" Vivian's body stiffened in fear, but Ethan reacted immediately. He snatched the phone and called the police, demanding they send a patrol car to the neighborhood. "This isn't just harassment anymore. It's a direct threat," he said angrily while speaking to the officers. Though the police assured them they would investigate, Vivian knew she couldn't rely solely on them. That night, as she lay in bed, her mind raced with questions. Who was behind this? Regina? Dominic? Or was it someone with even darker motives? The following day, while Vivian was working in her studio, an unexpected visitor arrived. Dominic. His presence seemed to suck the air out of the room, leaving behind an oppressive tension. He wore an impeccably tailored suit, but his expression was grim. Vivian felt a surge of both anger and fear. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice laced with irritation. She made no effort to hide. Dominic raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. I just want to talk, Vivian. Please, hear me out. Talk? After everything you've done? I don't think there's anything left to say, she replied, her tone unwavering even as her heart pounded in her chest. I know I made mistakes, Vivian, Dominic admitted, his voice softening. I've been thinking about us. I want to make things right. He took a step closer, but Vivian instinctively stepped back. Make things right? Do you really think pretty words can erase everything you've done? Her voice cracked slightly, but she refused to let the tears fall. Dominic tried to press on, but just then Ethan entered the studio. What the hell are you doing here, Dominic? He asked sharply, stepping between him and Vivian. Dominic raised his hands again, this time in resignation. I just wanted to talk, but clearly I'm not welcome. He turned to Vivian one last time. This isn't over, Vivian, he said before walking out, leaving her trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. Ethan slammed the door shut and turned to his sister. This has to stop, Vi. We need to make sure he doesn't come near you again. That night, Vivian made a decision. She wasn't just going to protect herself. She was going to confront whoever was behind this, no matter the cost. The encounter with Dominic had left her on edge, but it also fueled her resolve. She was terrified, yes, but she was done being a victim. As she stood in the kitchen with Amara and Ethan later that evening, she spoke with newfound determination. I'm not going to let Dominic, Regina, or whoever is behind this take away what I've built. But I also can't live like this anymore, she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. That night, a plan began to form in her mind. Ithana stood with her arms crossed, a worried expression shadowing her face. We need a plan, she said. First, let's make sure you're completely protected. The cameras we've installed are good, but we could add more. We should also consult a lawyer in case this escalates. And even though I don't fully trust them, we need to keep the police informed, Amara added firmly. Vivian knew her friends were right. The following day they met with a lawyer. He was an older man with a calm demeanor, who listened intently as Vivian recounted every detail of what had happened. Vivian, what you're describing amounts to harassment and clear threats, he said, adjusting his glasses. We can file for a restraining order against Dominic and his family, but I'll need solid evidence to back up the case. Vivian handed over photos, messages, and security footage, hoping it would suffice. This is a good start, but be prepared. This process might take time. Meanwhile, ensure your safety, the lawyer concluded. Although the meeting brought Vivian a sense of relief, she knew the journey ahead was far from over. That night, as she reviewed the security cameras on her phone, something caught her eye. A shadowy figure briefly appeared in front of her studio before disappearing into the darkness. Alarmed, she immediately called Ethan, who arrived quickly with a security guard. They combed through the footage and discovered the intruder had lingered for at least 15 minutes, moving around the building as though searching for a way in. This isn't random. They're trying to scare you, Ethan said, anger simmering in his voice. Vivian felt her stomach knot. What if they try something worse? She whispered, her fear rising. Ethan didn't reply, but the intensity in his eyes said it all. They were dealing with someone who wouldn't back down easily. A few days later, as Vivian worked on a special project for a magazine, she received an unexpected call. It was Regina. Vivian, we need to talk, Regina said, her tone cold and calculated. I have nothing to say to you, Regina. You've already made your point, Vivian replied, gripping her phone tightly. Regina's response was chilling. Oh dear, this isn't a conversation, it's a warning. You know Dominic doesn't give up easily, and neither do I. Do you really think you can just move on with your life like nothing happened? Her laughter cut through Vivian like a blade. Vivian hung up before Regina could say more. Her breathing was ragged, but instead of succumbing to panic, she called her lawyer. Regina just threatened me. This has to stop. What more can we do? She asked, struggling to maintain her composure. The lawyer assured her that the call strengthened their case, but warned her to tread carefully. In the meantime, he advised Vivian to avoid direct confrontations. That night, Vivian's fear turned into fury. She refused to let Regina or Dominic dictate her life. With the help of Ethan and Amara, she planned a grand opening event for her studio, a bold statement that she wouldn't be intimidated. On the night of the event, the studio was buzzing with friends, clients, and curious onlookers. Vivian wore one of her most striking designs, a red dress that radiated confidence and power. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her smile never wavered. "This is amazing, Vivian. Look at everything you've accomplished," Amara said, pulling her into a warm hug. The celebration was in full swing until Vivian spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Dominic. He stood at the back of the room, a glass of wine in hand, his smile not reaching his eyes. The air seemed to leave her lungs, but she forced herself to stay composed. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, striding toward him with determination. "Just came to congratulate you, Vivian. Looks like you've done something interesting here. Though, I do wonder how long it'll last," he said with a mocking smirk. Ethan appeared by Vivian's side in an instant. "Dominic, get out before I throw you out myself," Ethan said, his voice taut with anger. Dominic raised his hands in mock surrender, his grin smug. "Relax. I was just admiring the place." "Congratulations, Vivian. Enjoy your moment of glory," he said before strolling out, leaving a heavy cloud of tension behind him. Vivian knew deep down that this wouldn't be the last time Dominic tried to meddle in her life. Yet, as she watched her friends and clients enjoying the evening's festivities, a spark of hope flickered within her. She couldn't control everything happening around her, but she could choose how to respond. The grand opening of the studio was undoubtedly a success, but Dominic's presence had cast a shadow over the celebration. Despite this, Vivian refused to back down. That night, as she locked up the studio with Ethan's help, her resolve was clear in her eyes. "Vin, I know you don't want to hear this, but I really think you should consider hiring extra security for the magazine event," Ethan said, inspecting the door lock. "You're right, Gabe. I hate to admit it, but I don't want to give them another chance to ruin anything," she sighed, the weight of her words evident. In the days that followed, Vivian poured herself into preparing for the magazine project. Her designs were bolder than ever, a testament not only to her creativity, but also to her inner strength and resilience. Yet, a persistent unease lingered, as if unseen eyes were always watching. One afternoon, while Amara was assisting with some last-minute stitching, a strange noise outside the studio drew their attention. Ethan, who was nearby, stepped outside to investigate, but found nothing. Just a wilted flower left on the doorstep. It seemed harmless, but Vivian instinctively knew it was a message. "This isn't a coincidence, Cammy. Someone wants me to know they're watching," Vivian said, carefully picking up the flower, suppressing a shiver of fear. Amara crossed her arms, her frustration evident. "Let them watch. We're not stopping because of their petty games." Her tone was resolute, though her eyes betrayed her concern. The day of the magazine event arrived at last. Vivian, draped in an elegant suit of her own design, commanded attention. The venue was a vision of sophistication, adorned with tasteful decor and filled with clients, designers, and prominent figures from the fashion industry. For a brief moment, Everything felt perfect. But perfection proved fleeting. As Vivian unveiled her designs on the runway, a familiar figure caught her eye, Regina. She sat in the back row, her expression icy and unreadable. Beside her was an unfamiliar man scribbling notes into a small notebook. Vivian's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain composed. She wouldn't let their presence mar this important night. However, as the event wound down and the guests began to leave, Regina approached. "Vivian, darling, how could I miss this? It's fascinating to see how you're managing things, though I must admit I expected something a little more remarkable," Regina said, her smile dripping with insincerity. Vivian met her gaze, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You have no business being here, Regina. If you think you can intimidate me, you're wasting your time," she said firmly, her voice steady despite her frustration. Regina chuckled softly, as if Vivian's defiance amused her. "Oh, don't misunderstand me. I'm just here to observe. But let me offer you a little advice, free of charge. Don't get your hopes up. This little success of yours won't last." Before Vivian could respond, Ethan stepped beside her. "It's time for you to leave, Regina. You've said enough," he said, his tone unwavering and his posture commanding. His presence left no room for argument. Regina walked away, but not before casting one final look of contempt over her shoulder. That night, back at home, Vivian was utterly drained, emotionally and physically. While the event had been a professional triumph, Regina's presence, along with her mysterious companion, left a bitter aftertaste. "Vi, you can't keep handling this on your own. Let me hire someone to figure out who's behind all of this," Ethan said as he handed her a steaming cup of tea. Vivian hesitated but eventually nodded, acknowledging the need for help. The next day, Ethan contacted a private investigator, a man named Leon, renowned for his discretion and efficiency. "I'll begin by reviewing the recordings from your cameras and keeping a close eye on any suspicious activity. I'll also dig deeper into Regina and Dominic. If they're behind this, we'll uncover it soon," Leon assured during their initial meeting. Though Vivian still wrestled with a mix of fear and uncertainty, knowing someone was actively working to uncover the truth brought her a small sense of relief. A few days later, Leon returned with news. He had discovered that the man accompanying Regina at the event was an acquaintance of Dominic, a man with a record of intimidation and blackmail. "This confirms they're trying to scare you, Vivian. But what's even more concerning is that this man has been spotted loitering near your studio multiple times," Leon explained. Vivian's fear quickly transformed into anger. Not only were they trying to ruin her career, but they were also threatening her safety. "They won't win. If they want a war, they'll get one," Vivian declared, her voice firm with determination. That night, as she reviewed her sketches at home, a realization struck her. She had spent far too long allowing others to dictate her life. Now, it was time to take full control. Armed with Leon's findings, she resolved to take decisive action. The fear that once paralyzed her now fueled her determination. She knew confronting Regina and Dominic head-on would be reckless. She needed to be strategic. The next morning, alongside Ethan and Amara, she outlined a plan. "First, let's make sure they can't come near you again. If Leon's evidence is solid, we can file for a restraining order," Ethan said, sifting through some legal documents. "And second, you need to expose them. If they're trying to intimidate you, show them you're not afraid," Amara added with her characteristic directness. Vivian nodded, though the thought of going public with this battle was daunting. She understood that staying silent would only give them more power. A few days later, Leon unearthed more damning evidence. Regina had been using her influence to tarnish Vivian's reputation in the fashion industry. She had sent emails to potential clients and collaborators, insinuating that Vivian was unreliable and that her designs lacked quality. "This is defamation, Vivian. You have every right to sue her," Leon said, dropping a stack of printed emails onto the table. Vivian felt a surge of indignation and resolve. This was no longer just about protecting herself. It was about defending her reputation. "What are my options?" she asked, turning to the lawyer Ethan had hired. "We can send a cease and desist letter. If she doesn't stop, we'll proceed with a lawsuit. Not only will this force her to retract her statements, but it will also expose her tactics," the lawyer explained. Vivian approved the plan, and the letter was sent the next day. While she didn't expect Regina to back down easily, she knew this was the first step toward reclaiming control. Meanwhile, work at the studio continued. Vivian threw herself into her designs, channeling her stress and frustration into her creative process. One evening, as she reviewed the final details of a gown for an important client, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't think this is over. We're closer than you imagine." The message was short, but enough to make her anxiety spike. However, this time, Vivian refused to let fear consume her. She immediately reported it to Leon, who began tracing the source of the message. A few days later, Leon delivered alarming news. The message was sent from a disposable phone. "But what's more troubling is this. Someone's been tracking your movements. I have evidence that they've been watching you for weeks," he said, laying out photographs of Vivian taken at various locations. The air seemed to escape Vivian's lungs. The idea of being under constant surveillance was chilling, but it also ignited her fury. "Who's behind this? Is it Regina or Dominic?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing within. "I can't confirm yet," Leon replied, his tone measured. "But all signs point to Regina funding these actions. Dominic, on the other hand, seems to be acting more out of desperation than strategy." Vivian knew she couldn't afford to wait any longer. Determined, she scheduled a meeting with her attorney and Leon to strategize their next steps. During their discussion, it became clear that the best course of action was to expose Regina publicly. "If we bring this to light," the attorney said confidently, "it'll make it harder for them to keep operating in the shadows." Vivian nodded in agreement, but couldn't ignore the potential repercussions of such a bold move. As she prepared for the battles ahead, she received a call from a local journalist interested in her story. Initially hesitant, she decided to take the interview. It was her chance to share her truth and send a message to Regina and Dominic. The interview took place in Vivian's studio, a space filled with her art and resilience. The journalist, a young man brimming with enthusiasm, encouraged her to speak freely. "Vivian, you've faced incredible challenges over the past few months. Where do you find the strength to keep going?" he asked, his voice earnest. She drew in a deep breath, her determination unwavering. "It's not easy," she admitted, "but every challenge has made me stronger. This isn't just about defending what I've built, it's about proving that no one has the right to intimidate or sabotage another person's dreams." Her words were clear, her conviction shining through. When the interview was published days later, it quickly garnered attention on social media. Messages of support poured in, but Vivian was keenly aware that this exposure could provoke her adversaries further. That evening, while scrolling through the comments, she received a message from Leon. "Vivian, I've come across crucial information. We need to meet tomorrow." Despite her exhaustion, Curiosity and unease kept her awake. Deep down, she knew that whatever Leon had discovered could change everything. The next morning, Vivienne arrived early at Leon's office, accompanied by Ethan, who insisted she shouldn't face this alone. Leon greeted them with a serious expression, though a flicker of determination sparked in his eyes. "Vivienne, what I've uncovered changes everything," he began. "We have direct proof that Regina has been funding the intimidation campaign against you." He paused before adding, "And there's more. I found a connection between Dominic and the man seen lingering around your studio." Leon handed over a dossier filled with documents and photos. As Vivienne flipped through the pages, the weight of the evidence settled over her. Bank transfers, intercepted messages, surveillance reports. It was undeniable. Regina was the mastermind, with Dominic acting on her orders. "Is this enough to bring them to justice?" Ethan asked, his voice resolute. "Yes," Leon affirmed, "but we need to move quickly. If they find out we have this, they might destroy evidence or escalate their actions." Vivienne's resolve solidified. "Let's do it. I can't keep living in fear." Her attorney presented the evidence to local authorities, and though the process was arduous, the case began to take shape. Investigations into Regina and Dominic were launched, and legal proceedings commenced. Meanwhile, Leon hired additional security to protect Vivienne and her studio. But Regina didn't back down. Days after Vivienne filed her case, a thick envelope appeared in her mailbox. Inside was a copy of the complaint she had submitted, accompanied by a handwritten note. "You're playing a dangerous game. You know you can't win." Shaken but resolute, Vivienne handed the note to the authorities, who added it to their growing body of evidence. Still, the relentless harassment took a toll on her mental health. Concerned, Amara urged her to take a step back and find some time to breathe. "Vi, you need to unplug for a while. All of this is too much. Come stay at my parents' house in the countryside for a few days. No one will find you there." Amara's voice was kind but insistent. Vivienne weighed the suggestion carefully, but deep down, she knew she couldn't disappear now. Not when she was so close to the truth. "Thank you, Cami, but I can't leave. Not now. I have to finish what I started." A few days later, Leon arranged a meeting with Vivienne and her attorney. He'd uncovered new information that not only bolstered their case, but exposed something far more unsettling. "We've discovered that Regina is leveraging her network of contacts to stall the investigation," Leon warned, his tone grave. "She has allies in powerful positions who might try to interfere with the case." A surge of anger coursed through Vivienne. "What can I do to stop her? I can't let them get away with this again." Leon leaned forward, his expression serious. "We need public pressure. If people know what's happening, it'll be harder for Regina to manipulate the system." With Leon and Amara's help, Vivienne organized a press conference. The event took place in her studio, surrounded by friends, clients, and journalists. She stood before the cameras, her voice steady and resolute. "Today, I'm here to speak not just about what I've endured, but about what so many face in silence: harassment, intimidation, and abuse of power. No one should have to live in fear. And today, I say enough." Her words reverberated through the room, and the cameras captured every powerful moment. The press conference ignited an immediate reaction. The media began scrutinizing Regina and Dominic, and public pressure mounted rapidly. Messages of support poured in, but Vivienne knew this bold move could provoke dangerous retaliation. That night, while reviewing security camera footage, she received a tense call from Leon. "Vivienne, you need to hear this," he said, his voice taut with urgency. Leon had intercepted a call between Regina and Dominic. In the recording, Regina coldly discussed a plan to discredit Vivian, even resorting to violence if necessary. "I won't let her ruin our reputation. If we have to, we'll make her disappear for a while." Regina's voice was icy and calculated. Fear gripped Vivian, but it was quickly overtaken by a fierce, unyielding determination. "I'm done hiding," she declared, looking at Ethan and Amara with steely resolve. "It's time they see I won't back down." The showdown began to take shape the following day. Accompanied by Ethan, Amara, and Leon, Vivian submitted the intercepted recording as evidence to the authorities. The response was swift. Regina and Dominic were summoned for questioning, and the case gained even more traction in the media. Meanwhile, Vivian prepared for a pivotal interview. Leon had secured a meeting with a prominent national journalist who was eager to expose the full story. Although Vivian understood the risks of stepping further into the spotlight, she knew this was her best chance to ensure Regina and Dominic couldn't twist the narrative. The interview took place in Vivian's studio, now fortified with extra security measures. The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman with a calm demeanor, began the conversation with questions about Vivian's career before delving into the darker events. "Vivian, you've spoken about the harassment you've faced. How has it affected your personal and professional life?" the journalist asked, leaning forward with the microphone. Vivian took a deep breath. "It's been devastating," she admitted. "I've lost countless nights of sleep. I've lived in fear, constantly defending myself against relentless attacks. But it's also taught me to be stronger, to refuse to stay silent, and to fight for what I deserve." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the vulnerability she still carried. Yet, there was no mistaking the fire within her, a woman ready to take on whatever came next. The interview aired that very evening, and the reactions were swift and polarizing. While many rallied behind Vivian, Regina's allies began to quietly distance themselves, fearful of being ensnared in the growing scandal. Regina and Dominic, on the other hand, maintained a tense silence, though it was clear they were backed into a corner. A few days later, Leon received a phone call that led to a pivotal breakthrough. A former employee of Regina, embittered by the mistreatment he had endured, came forward to testify against her. His statement unveiled a long-standing pattern of manipulation and intimidation, bolstering Vivian's case and laying bare Regina's true nature before the public. Armed with this fresh evidence, authorities took decisive action. Regina was formally charged with harassment, defamation, and conspiracy to intimidate. Dominic, though less directly involved, also faced charges for his role in the harassment campaign. The courtroom was charged with tension on the day of the trial. Vivian, dressed in one of her own exquisite designs, sat with Ethan and Amara steadfastly by her side. Regina and Dominic, despite their composed appearances, couldn't conceal the strain etched into their expressions. When it was time for Vivian to testify, she rose and faced the jury with unwavering resolve. "For months, I've been the target of harassment and intimidation," she began, her voice steady yet impassioned. "I've received threats, been surveilled, and had my reputation relentlessly attacked. But today I stand here to declare that no one has the right to destroy someone else's dreams. Regina and Dominic abused their power to try to silence me, but they failed, and they will continue to fail." Her words reverberated through the courtroom, brimming with a strength no one could ignore. The trial spanned several grueling weeks, but the verdict finally came. Regina was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to several years in prison. Dominic, though receiving a lighter sentence, was nonetheless removed from Vivian's life. As Vivian exited the courthouse, she was greeted by a crowd of friends, loyal clients, and supporters whose lives had been inspired by her story. Though the fight had been arduous and deeply painful, Vivian had achieved something far greater than justice. She had proven that fear should never outweigh determination. In the months that followed, Vivian's life began to find a new rhythm. Her design studio emerged as a beacon of resilience, gaining even more recognition and respect in the fashion world. Yet, what mattered most was the personal transformation she had undergone, rediscovering her worth and her ability to shape her future on her own terms. One serene evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Vivian stood on the balcony of her new home, a glass of wine in hand. Amara and Ethan joined her, carrying the warmth of their friendship into the twilight. "Vi, you did it," Amara said, raising her glass in a toast. "You've shown the world that nothing and no one can hold you back." Vivian smiled, her heart brimming with gratitude. "I didn't do it alone," she replied, her voice filled with quiet strength. "But I did learn something. Sometimes, it's in the darkest moments that we discover our true light." With that certainty, Vivian closed a difficult chapter of her life and stepped boldly into a new one, filled with hope and endless possibilities. Wow, what a journey Vivian's story has been. While this tale is fictional, it's packed with powerful lessons that resonate deeply in real life. It's a reminder that strength and self-worth are not defined by the relationships we're in, but by how we rise above challenges. Vivian's resilience and determination to rebuild her life, despite the betrayal and intimidation she faced, is an inspiring example of courage in the face of adversity. This story also highlights the importance of supportive relationships. Friends like Amara and family like Ethan remind us that we don't have to face life's battles alone. And let's not forget the broader message. No one should tolerate abuse, intimidation, or attempts to destroy their dreams. Vivian's stand against injustice shows us the power of speaking out and reclaiming control of our lives. What did you take away from Vivian's journey? Did any part of the story resonate with you personally? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. Also, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength. Let's keep these conversations going because stories like this have so much to teach us. See you in the next video.